Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And today I wanted to take a look at the absolute mastery that JRR Tolkien had with poetry. And I want us to have a look at this because not only should we be spreading around just some more great wonders and goodness from Tolkien to put some more positivity out there in the internet, but also because I honestly do believe that we as novice writers can learn some really great things from looking at Tolkien's poetry. Now then, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. No one is going to become a poetic master right off the bat. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of work. And if you want to become a really good poet yourself, I highly encourage that you spend time with the poetry that you enjoy the most, the stuff that you find most appealing or meaningful to you. This can be poetry with deep meanings. This can be poetry with fantastic rhyme schemes and meters. This could be poetry with just really funny rhymes, or it could be very silly, could be very serious, very dark. There's all kinds of poetry out there, and you should look for the poetry that just clicks with you and spend time with it, study it, and then start writing your own. That is the best way that you will become good at poetry yourself. In fact, we can look to Tolkien's own life as an example. We know that he was a scholar, he was a linguist, and the thing is that Tolkien wasn't just sitting in his office translating some old scripts off of parchment and being given old books from like ancient Rome or ancient Gaul or where have you, and that he then just spent days and weeks translating the stuff. No, Tolkien actually was all about the art and about especially epic poetry. Tolkien himself was really enamored with the story of Beowulf. He translated it and he analyzed it and he took inspiration from Beowulf to write some of his own epic poetry that you can actually find in the Fellowship of the Ring. And so for this video, what I want to do is I want to look at some of the poetry that Tolkien wrote. I want to talk about how he used it to help lighten the mood, how he used it to communicate aspects of culture, and basically how he used it just because he's like, heck, I spend every day looking at ancient poetry. I love ancient poetry, so I'm going to flex my muscles. Not only have I made my own language and made up my own world, I'm going to make up my own poetry based on the cultures that I made up. Eat that, George R.R. Martin. So without any further ado, let's dive into the Fellowship of the Ring. Now, there is poetry all across the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And again, you can find very distinct features of various cultures and even races within the different forms of poetry and song that Tolkien wrote for each group. And this is something that he himself said when it comes to language. Language is a reflection of culture and of people, is a reflection of their values, of their history. That is language. And of course, you don't have poetry without language. And so if anything, poetry, at least in the mind of Tolkien, is basically the crowning achievement of what can be done with language, because you are taking the most important words or the most important meaning and you are enshrining it in something that isn't a long story, but rather a very concise statement, whether that be something for fun, something to communicate history, something to communicate meaning, or as he wrote it in some cases, to communicate spells. So there's a lot that you can do with poetry, and poetry, as I said, is kind of this crowning achievement of, I'm going to take the most important words to convey the most meaning. So let's have a look at some of these poems that Tolkien wrote in the Fellowship of the Ring. Now, one of the most famous poems that he wrote is the one revolving around the Rings of Power. And this right here is just a really neat poem to look at right here, because the way that he wrote it conveys something ancient right here. And I think it's also interesting that Sauron appropriates this poem for his own ring. Or is it possible that the poem was made based on what Sauron wrote? Interesting stuff right here. Stuff that we definitely won't see in the Rings of Power, but that's another matter. So let's dive into it right here. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where shadows lie. This is a really neat bit of poetry right here, and if we kind of come at this from the potential possibility that this is actually Sauron's own poem, this is really neat right here, because Sauron was a master of music. In the First Age, Sauron defeated the elven king Finrod in a powerful duel of magic, where the two of them sang at each other, and eventually Sauron overpowered Finrod with the power of his music. And when we read this poem right here, it is powerful. There is a fantastic rhythm to it. It rhymes in a very beautiful way, and yet each way in which it rhymes is compounded with very dark, harsh words. This is simultaneously a beautiful and harsh poem, which is perfect for a character like Sauron, who, at the height of his power when he forged the One Ring, was a beautiful being of light and power and knowledge. And yet, he was the Dark Lord, plotting the overthrow of all of Middle-earth. So this poem works really, really well for what we know of Sauron himself, and that's really neat to see. Then next, I come to Bilbo's poem right here. This is his travel song, and there's actually a bunch of different parts to this particular song which are meant to reflect the feelings of the people who sing it. And this is a very Hobbit style poem right here, very Hobbit song. Even though we know that the Hobbits weren't really big into adventuring beyond the Shire, Hobbits still liked having their fun little adventures. They enjoyed themselves. Hobbits are a fun-loving folk. And so we definitely get that here in this signature poem from Bilbo. Pay attention to it because it bobs, it's fun, and it definitely contains something of very much of Bilbo in it. So, the road goes ever on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with weary feet, until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet, and whither then I cannot say. I am not lying to you when I say I am getting goosebumps reading this poem right here. It's so dang good. And I love how this poem was put to song in the Lord of the Rings movies done by Peter Jackson. This is just, it's so good because it captures the essence of who Bilbo is. It also reflects just the simple, bumbling, beautiful ways of the hobbits. And it's also a great way of striking the mood for the adventure that the characters are about to go on as they strike on the quest, although they don't yet know it is a quest, to bring the One Ring to Mordor. And there are going to be so many people that they meet along the way, so many adventures, so many paths. This poem right here sets the tone for the much larger story that is ahead. Tolkien was an absolute genius when writing his poetry. Now, for a bit of contrast right here, remember what I said about how Tolkien uses poetry to reflect the differences in cultures, races, and people. And here we have an excellent contrast right here in terms of poetry when Frodo meets the elves. Again, in the Lord of the Rings movies, we actually get to see Frodo and Sam spying on the elves as they make their way to the Grey Havens. However, in the book, Frodo, Sam, and Pippin actually have an opportunity to meet the elves, and Frodo actually understands what they are singing and he translates it. And actually, his ability to understand the ancient tongue of the elves and being able to communicate with them is one of the things that's very important for him to gain safety from the elves as the Nazgul are chasing him, as well as to receive the really wonderful title of Elf Friend. But before that goes down, Frodo hears this beautiful song being sung by the elves as they make their way to the Grey Havens. Snow White, O Lady clear, O Queen beyond the western seas, O light to us that wander here amid the world of woven trees. Gith O'Neill, O Elbereth, clear are thy eyes and bright thy breath. Snow White, we sing to thee in a far land beyond the sea. O stars that in the sunless year with shining hand by her were sown, in windy fields now bright and clear, we see your silver blossom blown. O Elbereth, Glyth O'Neill, we still remember, we who dwell in this far land beneath the trees, the starlight of the western seas. Whew. Again, I just get goosebumps reading this stuff right here. And maybe it's because I've spent a lot of time going into the deeper lore of Middle-earth, but this poem right here, it's clearly different in its rhyme and rhythm from what the Hobbits sing, but it is beautiful and it feels ancient as they blend what we call the common tongue English with Elvish, and we get to hear these names that we don't fully understand. But if you dive into their history, you realize that they're singing of something ancient. They're singing of Valinor. They're singing of the creation of the world, and most important to the elves, they are singing of the stars, the first lights that the elves saw before they were taken to Valinor and saw the light of the trees. This is ancient history here, and yet they're singing as if they remember it like yesterday. This communicates the ancientness of the elves, their long-reaching memories, and the power of the elven race that was once theirs, that once ruled Middle-earth in the First Age. That is what we see here in this poem. Oh, it's awesome! Now, jumping back to the Hobbits, there's something that was done in the movies for the scene at the Green Dragon Inn, where Frodo hears the first whisperings of goblins in the mountains and far-off tales and children's stories that Bilbo would have chased. And as the scene begins, Merry and Pippin are singing a drinking song. Hey ho, to the bottle I go, to heal my heart and drown my woe. It's a great little bit, but actually, what they did when they made this scene for the movie is they actually appropriated another song that the Hobbits sing when they are taking a bath. And again, this right here, this is a great little poem that goes to show the character of the Hobbits themselves. And I'm just going to kind of sing it right here because this is fun. This is a wash-up song. So if you're ever wondering what you should sing in the shower, learn this little tune. Sing hey for the bath at the close of day that washes the weary mud away. A loon is he that will not sing. Oh, water hot is a noble thing. Oh, sweet is the sound of the falling rain in the brook that leaps from hill to plain. But better than rain or rippling streams is a water hot that smokes and steams. Oh, water cold we may pour at need down a thirsty throat and be glad indeed. But better is beer if drink we lack and hot water poured down the back. Oh, water is fair that leaps on high in a fountain white beneath the sky. But never did fountain sound so sweet as splashing hot water with my feet. Yeah! I'm not that great of a singer, but I just can't help myself because this is such a fun little bathing song right here. Again, this captures the character of the Hobbits, who they are, and it just shows that they love life. These guys really are the salt of the earth, the little guy, and the country folk that really are just living their best lives and have really no idea, especially at this point in the story, what kinds of horrors are closing in around them. So, speaking of horrors, I think I'm going to round out this whole little bit of poetry with a scene at the Barrow Downs. Now then, let me set the scene right here. One of the things that people always complain about when it comes to the Peter Jackson adaptation of The Lord of the Rings is that we don't get Tom Bombadil. Now then, as a kid, I was like, who needs Tom Bombadil? It's one of the slowest parts in the story. As an adult, I can definitely more appreciate the Tom Bombadil chapters within The Lord of the Rings. However, at the same time, I still understand this would have been quite a big deviation for the movies to take. It really does jumble around a bit with the overall pacing of the story. However, for Tolkien, when he wrote this, one of the things to understand is that the Fellowship of the Ring, especially the first half of it, is a horror story, and that it's meant to go at a much slower pace as evil slowly creeps in on the hobbits. And Tom Bombadil, everything that has to do with him is just mostly a reprieve from the darkness that's about to hit. And Tom Bombadil's a really fun character who gives, once again, glimpses into the past and the true nature of Middle-earth and its ancient history, its magic, and its many people. And one of the things that we need to understand about Tom Bombadil is that since he's such an ancient being himself, he and his powers harken back to the beginning of Arda and of all creation, when everything was created with magical song. The most powerful spells in all of Middle-earth and its history are woven with music. And Tom Bombadil has his very own unique way of singing and making rhymes. And you can hear it in his name, Bombadil. Everything is bouncy, bouncy, bouncy. If you thought that the Hobbit songs and their poetry was whimsical and fun, Tom Bombadil cranks it up to 11, but it's mixed in with a whole ton of mystery. You have to really be paying attention to what you're reading in order to understand the many songs and poems that come out of Tom Bombadil's mouth. Now, Tom Bombadil gives some songs to the hobbits to sing should they ever need him. And basically what he's giving them is he's giving them magic. And this is very important to note right here, because what I'm about to read to you from a scene in the chapter Fog on the Barrow Downs, the hobbits, the Barrow-wights, and Tom Bombadil are all wielding magic through the medium of music. And they are basically fighting each other. And so, just once again, for a little bit of quick context, if you haven't read the book, what's happening right here is that Frodo, Sam, Pippin, and Merry are all taken captive by Barrow-wights, and they're about to be sacrificed in a horrible ritual within a tomb where a bunch of dead people are laid, people who harken back to the Second Age, during the time when the Ringwraiths first came into being, and the Witch King of Angmar began to lay siege to the lands. Later on, he would return to overthrow the northern kingdom of Anarion, and would almost bring to an end the line of Isildur. These Barrow-wights harken back to those ancient wars and these people and wizards, and it is them who have been brought back to life by the Witch King as he made his way to Hobbiton, to make sure that just in case his prey escaped him somehow, he would awaken all of his servants and have them on the lookout for the hobbits. And they have caught them, and they are about to kill them, and this is what happens. Suddenly a song began, a cold murmur rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, sometimes like a low moan from the ground. Out of the formless stream of sad but horrible sounds, strings of words would now and again shape themselves, grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved, and the cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered. Frodo was chilled to the marrow, and while the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart, he perceived that it had changed to an incantation. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and steel on gold here let them lie, till the dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. To which Frodo responds with evoking the magic of Tom Bombadil. Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood, and hill, and by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us. And then, through the stonework and through the tomb, is heard Tom Bombadil. Oh, Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. None has ever caught him yet, for Tom, he is the master, and his songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster. And then, as the tomb is broken open by Tom Bombadil, his song changes. And this is the song that he sings to the Barrow-wight. Get out, you old wight, vanish in the sunlight, shrivel like the cold mist, like the winds go wailing, out in the barren lands far beyond the mountains. Come never here again, leave your barrow empty, lost and forgotten be, darker than the darkness, where gates stand forever shut, till the world is mended. This is honestly an amazing moment right here within the Fellowship of the Ring. One of the things that we have to understand right here is that basically Tolkien is writing something that I guarantee he was looking forward to when he began writing his books, because he had already in his mind scenes of powerful beings singing magical songs to each other in contests of might, like Sauron and Finrod. But here we get it on a much smaller scale, and I think a scale that Tolkien understood would be far more understandable for his readers to really digest. And I want to have a look at how these poems, these songs, are different from each other and how they evoke certain kinds of power. So, for the Barrow-wight, who sings cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, this is a very harsh poem. For those of you who have ever read the Inferno, and especially looked at it in the original Italian, the Inferno is written very harsh, very sharp. And even if the rhyme scheme sounds kind of fun, those sharp words are then complemented by darker words. So when you hear this right here, it's bone and stone, bed and dead, die and lie. And even where we get hand and land, it is the dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. It's a very harsh poem bespeaking the evil power that is using this incantation with which it intends to slay the four hobbits. And then as we get Frodo singing this song to call Tom Bombadil, effectively this song is a magical incantation calling for help. Hey ho Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo. Again, using Bombadil's name as bup-ba-dup-ba-dup-duh, we get an idea for how he would normally sing his music. By water, wood, and hill, by reed and willow, by fire and sun and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us. Bup-ba-dup-ba-dup-ba-dup. It complements the character of Tom Bombadil himself. And then when we hear his music come, it's basically an incantation for instant teleportation. My feet are faster, my strongs are stronger. Boom, here I am. I'm gonna win the day. Tom Bombadil, this guy right here, he's all chill because he knows he's going to win. And yet when he breaks open the tomb and faces down the Barrow-wight, his song changes. It becomes harsher without an immediate rhyme scheme to it. So when we look at it right here, get out you old wight, vanish in the sunlight, shrivel like the cold mist, like the winds go wailing, out unto the barren lands far beyond the mountains. Come never here again, leave your barrow empty, lost and forgotten be, darker than the darkness, where gates stand forever shut till the world is mended. The way that the poem reads is again very much like Tom Bombadil. Bum ba bum ba bum ba bum. However, like I said, the immediate rhyme scheme isn't there. It is a harsher poem that follows with the character of Tom Bombadil himself. What is absolutely fascinating here within this exchange of poems is that we get to see basically different kinds of magic. We get reflections of good and evil and of the clash of their power in their songs. This is again why I honestly say Tolkien was a master of poetry right here. You can get so much out of these poems and songs, and this is all fictional stuff right here. And what I've just quoted to you guys is not even the beginning of all of the different songs and poems that Tolkien put into his books. There's so many of them. So what I would highly recommend, especially to those of you who really want to get into poetry, take a look at Tolkien's poetry. He wrote a lot of it, and he wrote it in all different kinds of styles that reflect various cultures and personalities, different races even. And this is just absolutely phenomenal. If you want to see versatility in rhyme and poetry, go look at the works of Tolkien. Spend some time with it. Now then, I wish that I could give you just some great solid advice that would make it so that, boom, the next time you write poetry for your stories or just poetry for fun, that it would just be amazing. But I'll be honest, I'm not that great at poetry. I actually just spent an entire weekend trying to come up with some poetic stanzas for a silly story that a character in one of my books is singing, and it took me hours to come up with what's basically drivel. It's going to take a lot of editing to get it right. So if there's two bits of advice that I could give, number one, make sure that you're editing your poetry. But number two, again, spend a lot of time with the poetry that you enjoy the most, with the poets that have inspired you. Pay attention to their work, study it. That way then you can see this is what works, but then spend some time making it your own. Anyone can copy someone else's work, but making it your own is really its own adventure and necessary struggle. And that's something that Tolkien did. Tolkien loved the epic poetry of hundreds of years ago from various cultures, and he definitely drew inspiration from it, but he did not copy it. Because when you read his own poetry, oh my gosh, it's something else. So, with all that being said, I just I cannot recommend enough, read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, spend some time with all of the great poems and songs that Tolkien wrote and put into his books because they are amazing. And it will really, again, give you, I think, a really good appreciation for why his works are what we call legendarium. He didn't just write an amazing story with an amazing world and characters. He breathed life into this world through so many different means, and one of the most beautiful of which that he gave us is music and poetry. It's incredible. So definitely, please check it out. And if you're looking for more writing advice that isn't just me gushing about how much I love the works of JRR Tolkien, please check out our other videos here on Camille's Harem. You can also check out our podcast episodes where you'll get to hear the entire harem get together and discuss the adventures and woes and ideas that will help you out when it comes to writing your own stories. And if you're looking for some great writing challenges, we have those over at our Pinterest page, and we would love for all you novice writers out there to join our ever-growing community of authors. Links for all of that and more are down in the description below. Thank you for joining us on this adventure that we call writing, and until the next video, y'all, the road goes ever on, and tschüss.